All right, thank you all for coming. Welcome to this Ordinary Council meeting, 15th of March 2021. I'll hand over to Presiding Member Mayor Brad Flaherty to facilitate the meeting.
Thanks, Matt. So, acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Barngarla people, the traditional owners of the land we meet on today, and their continuing connection to the land, sea, culture and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within our community. The City of Port Lincoln acknowledges and respects the diversity of cultural heritage and beliefs within our community. As a council, we are committed to serving the best interests and needs of all people in our city, and we endeavour to discharge our duties conscientiously to the best of our ability. Thanks very much. Please be seated. If you have a mobile phone, can you please put it on silent or turn it off? Thanks. Welcome to those in the gallery, those from the press, people undertaking deputations tonight, staff and elected members. Thank you very much for your attendance. Just running around the room very quickly. Present, Councillor Broadfoot, Councillor Roussel, Councillor Lynn, Councillor Davis, Councillor Jolly, Deputy Mayor Ritchie, Councillor Davies, Councillor Staunton and Councillor Dodd. Thanks very much. There are no apologies tonight. Declarations of conflict of interest. Councillor Roussel, you had some?
Yes, I do. I have a conflict of interest 12.5, 12.6 and 12.7 regarding the Flinders seat as Chair of West Coast Youth, and we lease the pub out there. There's an actual conflict of interest as Chair.
Okay, you.
I will be leaving.
You'll be leaving?
I'll leave the chamber.
For the whole three or just?
No, for the three, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Lynn with perceived conflict of interest in these same agenda items.
Yes, I have three perceived conflicts, particularly with the location of the library, as my brother Bruce Lynn, I am as Chair of SA Libraries. I will be staying for the meeting and otherwise.
Okay, thanks, mate. Does anyone else have any conflicts that they'd like to declare? So all paperwork has been submitted for those that have declared?
Yes.
Yep. Peter?
Yes.
Thanks.
We might throw a spanner in the works because I know that we've got two people who are doing a deputation tonight. We're not at agenda item 9.1 just yet.
Sorry, can everyone please speak up?
Speak up.
What's being televised outside needs to come through a bit louder, so if you can just concentrate on actually raising voices a bit today.
Excellent.
So
just like to, if we can, deal with item 9.1 prior to any other item of business. Just noting that Angela and Steve, who have joined us this evening, have a date with touch footy at 6:50.
Oh, right.
So yeah, 10 minutes really needs to start now if possible.
Can't let the team down.
okay. All right, we'll skip to item 9.1. Welcome, come on up and listen to what you have to say. I'll restrict you to 10 minutes, so okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Nice uniforms.
Thank you.
I don't have to use the full.
So I did want to apologise about our attire. Obviously, we're doing it again. One after this. Now, I'm not very good with electronics, so is that okay? We'll just go page by page. Thank you. So thank you, Mayor and councillors, for agreeing for us to attend tonight. We are here just to talk a little bit about Lincoln Cinema and what the redevelopment or the proposed redevelopment means for us. We've got some slides that we'll talk through as we go along. I did want to make note of Mr. Mike Munro, who is here on behalf of Port Lincoln Rotary and the Community Bank. And he is representing both of those, and Rotary has been integral in the running of the cinema for the past 12 years and then some, so many years prior to that as well. And we appreciate all their support in helping us pull this together and supporting us all the way through till now. Awesome. So, yeah, perfect. So our idea is going forward, what we would really like to see for a cinema in Port Lincoln is something that creates a sense of belonging, which is really important, particularly for regional communities. Services like a local cinema serve to bring people together for an entertainment experience beyond their home, and these experiences must be highly enjoyable to ensure a high frequency of repeat patronage to sustain a level of vibrancy in the area. So most of what we'll be talking about today is how we think we can make that happen. This is just an excerpt from the Independent Cinemas Australia media release that they've just put out over the last week. Obviously with COVID, we've had all sorts of issues in the cinema industry, and we've been somewhat shut down with the films that we can release. The Independent Cinemas Australia have been working really, really hard with the government to try and make sure that the support is there to keep regional cinemas open. But as you'll note, they have suggested that the independent cinemas employ thousands of Australians and provide cultural hub where communities can gather, and they can also play a vital role in the Australian screen ecosystem. Over 75% of Independent Cinema Australia's independent cinemas are in regional Australia, providing vital social and cultural infrastructure to their local communities. And more than $110 million a year goes straight into regional Australia, where our cinemas are the heart of the community, contributing to social engagement, keeping small towns vibrant and sustaining surrounding restaurants, shops and businesses. Independent cinemas are critical infrastructure for Australian cultural landscape and our local film industry. Despite the dominance of Hollywood movies, more Australians see Australian stories at independent cinemas than any other cinema location. So we just really wanted to let you guys know that it's an Australia-wide push right now that keeping independent cinemas vibrant and at the centre of the community is really, really important. So we do also want to acknowledge that moving forward, we want to work with Port Lincoln City Council. So the vibrancy of the new development has the capacity to create a positive entertainment experience for both locals and visitors alike. We want to support the Port Lincoln City Council in its endeavours and feel that the new redevelopment can succeed and have a positive impact on the long-term success of the cinema. And we want to make sure that we're providing a richer cinema experience, which will be critical to enticing patrons who are becoming more comfortable with home streaming services. So we are aware that these are some of the issues that we need to face, and we're hoping that we can work with Port Lincoln City Council to move forward on those things. Our current target audience, so these are over the last, obviously 2 years, given COVID happened last year, we've taken our stats from March 2019 to February 2020. By far, families on the Eyre Peninsula are our biggest attendees at Port Lincoln Cinema, and in fact, school holidays are at times when we are at our peak. Senior citizens are very close to that, and they provide us with a across the board attendance, so they're there week in, week out, and that's irrespective of what's going on. Young adults then come in soon after that. Tourists and visitors to Port Lincoln do make up a little bit of our patronage during the school holidays. Local and visiting schools and school holiday programs also kind of buffer up some of that. And just to the side there, you'll see that adults and children are the ones who are attending our cinema the most. So this is just a little bit of statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics 2018 and 19. And I know that it's a little bit outdated, but 12 months before the interview in 2017-18, most Australians, 82.4, aged 15 and over, attended a cinema, art gallery, museum, library or live performance. And the highest attendance rates were at cinemas and drive-ins. And I'll just note across to the other side that cinemas and drive-ins have the most repeat type business. So that's the one place that you get community members going back over and over again, and that's for young people aged, people aged 15 and above. So it is one of those experiences, along with libraries, that is just something that you'll go back to over and over and over again. Moving forward, our hopes, and this is Stephen and I myself, is for a cinema that caters to the needs of the local community. That's probably our biggest push. We want to make sure that whatever is available in this town does cater for the needs of the local community. And we'd like to see a cinema that is economically viable and provides a quality entertainment experience. So for us, moving forward, we hope that we can have something that works across the community, but that provides that real quality entertainment.
All right, my turn. All right, awesome. So we've got 3 options that we think can go forward with the cinema. Keeping the current building. We totally understand that some repairs will need to be done to the current building if it's kept. And that we would, as Lincoln Cinema, keep all the cinema equipment going. We currently employ 10 staff, so we'd like to keep that going. There's no significant financial impact to, what's that word? Continuity. Thank you. Of businesses, community is supportive of current business model, so we think we're going okay as a centre as it is at the moment, so keeping the current building will keep going forward positively, hopefully. And we are also looking at maybe potentially putting like an escape room in the old building to the right in the room, just for another option of a business and something else to the community. And the cost implications, we totally understand that there's a cost of an upgrade and upkeep of a current building. Update the cafe area in there to incorporate the escape room, need soundproofing, etc. And the startup cost of equipment required to the escape room. So they're just the cost implications of keeping the current building. Option B is the redevelopment that was proposed as an option. We think that it needs a minimum of 100 seats to be a viable business for anyone who wins a tender, if that happens. So the new equipment and purpose-built facility would be put in. Ideal numbers would be 120 seats, but minimum 100 would be good. The ideal setup would be a 2-screen cinema, so maybe half the numbers of 50 and 50. We think that's more effective. Caters for bigger user groups, such as fundraising groups, school groups. That's with the 2 cinemas. Allows for no minimal increase in ticket prices, making it affordable. So we think 2 screens, we don't have to increase the cost of tickets because we can afford rent and so forth, the 2 things. The cafe would be styled to incorporate the original building in some way. So we think that maybe keeping the old look of chandeliers and stuff, we might be able to incorporate it as a possible idea, and some impact to businesses in the area of cost of living. Sorry, I lost myself.
So that would be, so because we would need to move, there'd be some impact.
Yep. And cost implication of that one would be the cost of the new development and new equipment, including cafe, and the cost of removal of what we've currently got in there. And option C was the original option of only 50 seats, which would be new equipment and built facility. Price of tickets, we believe, would need to increase just to be able to keep cost of rent going. And it could be less attractive for some families and patrons just because it's a bit smaller and we don't be able to get as many movie options. We would not be able to cater for some fundraising group and school groups due to the size. So lessons who we can hire the place out to. And then we've spoken to some people said that they might go to Adelaide or somewhere else rather than coming back another time when there's a seat available. Some impact to the business. The switch includes the cost of moving, and we believe it's not a viable option. And the implications be, cost implications is the new development, including the cafe, cost of removing all that stuff, and we believe it's a decrease in income, just not as many seats. Just a quick thing, we have a 2 screen versus 1. We believe there's more choice, more flexibility with distributors, no increase in staffing costs, more possibilities for private eye and alternative use like sports, music and education. And this option has been recommended by members of Independent Cinemas Australia and their digital technology. So we've spoken to a couple of big honchos we know with their digital. Oh, about 10 minutes.
That's 2 minutes.
Oh,
Wrap up.
One slide.
oh, easy. Yep. So next slide.
We can probably skip this one, which is just more information about independent cinemas in United Kingdom, and they say the same thing about 2 screens.
Yep. And then the last one. So this is the guy who does all the servicing of all cinemas, projectors in South Australia, Northern Territory, and he thinks that there's some options there. What he thinks should be considering the design of building a new movie theatre and having the 2 screens. So yeah, just saying things like just need to think of the acoustics when separating the 2 movies if we have it that way. Reclining seats will need to have come in with extra slope space, so when you go back you can still watch the thing. You go.
Yeah, that's right. Just that it needs that, like, there's probably reduced cost in doing some of these things, but you guys can read
that if you've got more time later. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Any questions? Any questions?
One question there. With the twin screens, I know that some facilities look at you know, a higher number for one and a smaller number for the other? Is that something that you see as?
Yeah, we would definitely look at something like maybe a 60, 70 screen and then a smaller 40, 50 to make sure that it's easier to kind of utilise for dual purpose.
So Domes.
Thanks for the presentation. Can I just ask, with 2 screens, can you use both theatres at the same time with the same film?
You can, absolutely.
Do you have to have 2 films or?
No, you can play the same film in two cinemas. We would be looking at it as a kind of delay system. So you'd play one movie and then delay by an hour so that you've got the same staff getting in the next movie. That's where you reduce your costs. So yeah, that's right. You'd have your staggered kind of movie times.
Yeah, thank you. Makes sense.
Councillor Davies.
Thanks for the presentation, Ange and Steve. At the moment, you've only got 1 theatre. How many seats?
We have 180 seats at present.
180 seats. Regardless of which way you go, which way we go, there's going to be your business interrupted.
Correct.
So if you were the person making all the decisions, what do you think would be the most viable thing to do as far as making money in this county? You know how many funds get on seats.
Yes.
You know how many times that there is only, 10 people in a cinema. And I hope you realise how much it would cost to create
Absolutely.
2 cinemas, and that all comes from the community's money, And what about the building? What's your thoughts about it?
We love the building that we're in at the moment, but we're very aware that there are issues within the building that are not easy fixes. So there are issues with pipes, plumbing, there are issues with floorboards. The kitchenette isn't utilised at all other than for us to sort of store some stuff. It's just the walls are falling apart in there. So we're aware that there is a lot of money that needs to go into that building if it was to be fixed to be utilised as it is. Certainly from a business perspective, and we've really struggled with this because we're very community minded and we've had to put on business hats, which doesn't sit so well for the 2 of us. But from a business perspective, a new cinema with 2 screens would certainly make a business that is currently it's making ends meet. Certainly not during COVID, but prior to that, it would make it a much more viable business. It's something that would generate more people coming in, provide more opportunities. We could tap into unis to come and use the lecture space and that kind of stuff. We don't have that capacity right now in what we've got at present. Something new that's purpose-built would certainly give us that opportunity.
Yeah, Angela and Toby, thanks for the presentation. Just on your numbers pre-COVID, what was your average? 180 seat capacity.
Yeah.
What did you average for patronage?
Look, during the school holidays, we were probably averaging something in the vicinity of 80 to 90 people per screening. And then in the off times, we were probably looking at something like 60 to 70, depending on the movie. There were some movies where we get no shows, and that's still the case now. It's all dependent on what the film companies allow us to play. But on those really big ones, for instance, Lion King, we were booked out 180 seats for 2 weeks straight.
It's a bit of a hard question, sorry to answer.
Yeah, just to get it, so you've got 180, you're suggesting 100 would be ideal over 2 cinemas. Yeah, so you max out on occasions.
Yeah, and that's what we'd be aiming for.
Any other questions at all? Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your time. Sorry to go before.
Sorry to make you late. Let's go back to item 4 now.
Okay, what we'll do now is we'll go back to item number 4. Confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I assume there's no clarifying questions required. No, can I have a mover then, please, for the recommendation? Councillor Roussel, do I talk on it?
No.
Second, Councillor Broadfoot, do I talk on it?
No, thank you.
Okay. Those in favour? Motion carried, thank you. Item 5 is the adjourned items, there are none. Item 6 is the questions with and without notice. There are none. Item 7 is a notice of motion from Councillor Broadfoot. Report on condition of voting facilities in the port. Councillor Broadfoot, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, thank you. So I've outlaid it. Everybody's read their agenda, I'm assuming. So I was approached by Proper Bay boat ramp users who have been concerned about their safety and that of others, particularly where we've got individuals and sometimes it takes them 3 people to hold the boat when they're coming back in, because there's nowhere to tie the boat off while they go and get their car. So in the immediate response to that, thanks to Murray and the team who did go out and do some improvements out there. To further that, I guess I'm interested in requesting a report on the boating facilities maintenance and upgrades required, including options and potential costs to be prepared for consideration as part of the 21-22 budgeting process. There's other elements around for boat users, like getting a fish cleaning station, which I think we've talked about for many years at Axel Stenros, getting solar lights on that. Lighting's not so much an issue there, because you've got some lighting around the place, but out at Billy Lights there, it would be good to illuminate that with some solar lighting, and also looking at investigating options for lighting the sticks coming back. So I mark the sticks so I know where they are, but if people are new to the area or don't take marks, when you're coming back in and it gets dark, then you can, get a bit lost as you come back across. So just making sure that that's really safe for everybody. So it's really the process that we normally go through, which is getting a report back to council, and then also I put in there about speaking to other boat users about their priorities within that process, if council team choose to do that, so that we can just look at, there might be things I haven't thought of in this motion, and that report could cover that, and then we could look at that for offsetting through the Boating Facilities Fund, and that will cover 80% of any project costs for projects that fit within their strategic plan. So I think there's about $40 million there for allocation for boating facilities. So I'd like to see us dedicate some of that for the safety and improving the usability of facilities in Port Lincoln.
Thanks. So I take it that it's moved.
And it's moved.
Yep. Can I have a second then, please? Councillor Lynn, would you like to speak on it?
I'm in agreement. It's good to look at getting some upgrades and toilets closer.
Okay. Any questions at all? Any speakers for or against? Councillor Dodd.
So, I support the motion. I was just wondering whether, do you mean to incorporate some preliminary design concepts at all?
Oh, no, I was more looking at, I didn't think about it that far. I was more looking at, because I'd received some complaints or some concerns from boaties about it. I was more looking at, because I was trying to find, we've had previous reports and I was trying to find them in our archives and things. So it's more about looking at what's there, maybe looking at what's happening in other areas, and then what sort of recommendations can be made. And then we would go for funding for design and that sort of thing.
So through you, Mayor Brad, if I may, just to clarify, I guess in looking at, in response to the notice of motion from Councillor Broadfoot, the intention would be to prepare, I would estimate at this point, quite a rudimentary fundamental report for consideration and presentation back to council during the budget briefing and workshops, and then the discussion on whether it gets included into the budget consideration from there. Being realistic, we're not going to have the time, given some of the other workload we've got in that area, to have any sort of detailed planning. But it'll be quite rudimentary elements, as Councillor Broadfoot's referring to, and some high-level budget estimates plus some funding options behind that as well.
The point that you raised about lighting and the channel markers, that would be a council responsibility.
It's inside the water. I don't think we're through that.
Yeah, anyway. So, if there was nothing else, all those in favour? Motion carried. Thanks. Thanks. Item 8 is petitions. Petition received, the heritage listing of the Flinders Theatre and the Baptist Church. So there's been a report that's been included at item 12.5, which we'll roll into immediately after deputations. Item 8.2 is a petition received, request for further consultation on the proposed demolition of Flinders Cinema. Again, we'll move into that as part of 12.5, 12.6, 12.7, which will go to item 10. Carry out the deputations, and then we'll go through elected members' reports and then we'll jump across.
So Mayor Brett, I will just table those petitions at this point, just because they're on the agenda. So the 2 petitions are received there. So if elected members want to review those prior to discussing them, they're available for consideration, but they have been formally tabled in the meeting as we stand.
Right, come up and grab them.
So we'll skip to item 9.2. Was Diana Vislov, community consultation submission, economic stimulus projects. Come up and have a deputation next time. And I'll restrict it to 10 minutes as we have everyone else.
Thank you, Mayor Brad, for granting permission to speak to the council tonight. And I'd like to thank CEO Matthew for the resources and information for the recent community meeting. I also want to thank council staff for the many hours they must have spent putting together the projects, the budgets, presentations, etc. for grant consideration. I have a PowerPoint that will just cycle through some images and takeouts from the community meeting. Firstly, I wanted to address why there was a need for a community meeting, and this stemmed from the many approaches made to me as a former councillor on the need for more information. There was a lot of misinformation being talked about. The community believed and were surprised that given the length of conversation and consultation undertaken by council to compile the Jensen Plus master plan for the CBD, foreshore and marina, that the same time was not spent on these projects. Jensen's plan cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and enormous staff hours and was adopted by council in September 2020 and even won 2 awards from the Planning Institute. There is or was also budget consideration this year to deliver some of the quick wins based on this plan. Whilst the community may not have all agreed with the plan, it just seems such a waste not to have incorporated the design elements into the grant applications and also to have considered the Flinders Theatre and Baptist Church demolition without any consultation with the community. Of course, we know that the projects are subject to funding, that not all will be funded, that there are still review processes to be undertaken and feedback to be considered, but I draw your attention to the community concerns. A major concern was in the economic stimulus project report prepared for council in January 21 that mentioned there was limited need to consult with the community on page 14, and that council only has to listen and acknowledge the feedback on page 15. We had a successful turnout for the meeting, some positives and negatives were raised and general discussion regarding each of the projects. There was an overwhelming feeling of a lack of representation at the council by those that attended. They even moved a vote of no confidence, which would have been unanimous but for 2 votes. They felt as if they were not consulted, not regarded, no one was listening and no one cared. But what was very evident was that the community did care. I think the response to the Survey Monkey must be one of the best ever recorded by council. This shows the depth of caring. The petition of over 1,000 signatures to have council reconsider its projects shows just how much people care. That was the very first positive from the meeting. The second positive was the recognised importance of stormwater projects, and in particular LeBrun Street, which features in the grant application, and also the problems with the outlets at the yacht club, which need urgent repair. There was also the feeling that the seawall and existing infrastructure on the foreshore should be addressed before adding any caravan or theme park type activities for youth or the boardwork to the top of the toilet block. Slides presented will show some of the many pieces of infrastructure which have existed on our foreshore, only to be removed again later, restoring it to the open green spaces we now have. Please don't clutter the foreshore with items that will require constant maintenance, leaf cleaning, become an eyesore, possibly be removed again in the future at great expense to our ratepayers. The third positive was that the community meeting had an appetite to form a resident and ratepayer association. to keep the momentum going and to follow up with some actions. Following the community meeting, we've now had a separate meeting to form a committee and held our first committee meeting. We've started receiving paid foundation memberships and have registered an ABN. The executives include myself, Heather Curtis, Dylan Cowley and Kimberly Conway, and we have a steering committee of 7 members. The Port Lincoln Community Action Group are still determining their objectives, but will be regularly meeting to watch the results of the grant funding applications and to take some initiatives of their own. One of the things I hope we will be progressing is the checking of the local heritage listings, and you will see in the slides some old documentation dating 1971 and 1985, mentioning that the Baptist Church, which appears to have had this recommended, however, council development plans now only mention those places that are state heritage listed. There is an opportunity to work with council to check our local history. Local historian Margaret Tilsner mentioned to me that Port Lincoln actually has a historical precinct, which included the post office, courthouse, St Thomas's, the police station, the Baptist Church and the theatre. This could be capitalised on for tourists and marketing. Tourists have a fascination with local history, and it would be wonderful to incorporate both old and new elements wherever we can. Our own residents have fond memories, and destroying our history would be not just a shame, but almost sacrilege. Some have said the Baptist Church parish handed the church over and didn't want it, but we understand that there may have been pressure from council over car parking and that they were reluctant to leave. There are also other opinions and also structures attached to the site that may not be historical and could be sacrificed to make better use of the space and land. Councillors may recall that the Arteria site, which was also considered for demolition and replacement with a community hub. After reports from the users, council's changed its mind and decided to upgrade instead. The historical significance of that building to its users is immeasurable. A recurring theme of the community meeting was local knowledge, local contractors, and I draw on the publication Creating Vibrant Communities by Dean Landy, an architect and urban designer, who advocates for community activation by connect, consult and create, giving some ownership of establishing a process to allow community, commerce and council to connect using a place committee and local champions. He also suggests developing a community skills register, a place where community members could list their interests, skills and local knowledge, something that is so important. Councillors, you have an opportunity to really reflect on the feedback, of which there is much. Please don't believe assumptions if they're not validated. Please don't discount the feedback that's been provided. There are possibilities for you to change anything, right up until you sign an agreement with a builder. Please consider your influence. Please talk to your communities. It was very disappointing not to have any of you hear the voices of the community meeting, which may have been so valuable to your decision making. I understand the council consultation methods, and to date, unless they include a free breakfast, I wonder if they are the best they can be. It was disappointing to learn that the Mayor presented to senior pensioners, but not to community. Similarly, that the CEO met with school children, but not with community. We know there are drop-in sessions coming up later this month, and we also know they are for budget population, and that anything said there will not be included as a submission. It might be informative to some members of the community, and I do hope they take advantage of them. Please, councillors, use your influence to consider things outside the box. We have heard it's not viable to refurbish, adapt or reuse the theatre, yet Victor Harbour will be doing just that. We haven't seen the costings that make any of this not viable. Can they be shared to the project website page? Please consider the cost to our community of losing our history piece by piece. Look at the beautiful work undertaken at the courthouse, which is now such a beautiful building, retaining its heritage, but immaculately appointed. Yes, it will cost money, but the investment may be in the right things, not in disposable foreshore infrastructure or tilt-up buildings with no personality. The VIC library complex mentions the future development and staging options, yet the documents don't mention council office expansion. How are these things all impacted, and when will community get to consult on them? Community values an open and transparent council. The tiered parking plans and reduction of parking on the foreshore are all areas of concern on our busy arterial roads. The financial commitment to the projects planned in the projected long-term financial plan shows we're looking at borrowings over 18 years and that it will take 38 years to pay back the cost. Council's contribution paid down by lease income and savings. This doesn't include the finance costs of $1,180,000, which would add another 7 years compounding. We may be all dead by then. I'm really appreciative of being permitted to present to you all. We know there are a lot of ifs, buts and maybes, but please let the community be part of the conversation. If this once in a generation funding opportunity arrives, please don't let that generational debt be for the things that the community don't want, need or hope to preserve. Your opening chamber statement includes respecting diversity of cultural heritage. Please give these big decisions the weight and importance they deserve and the appropriate amount of community consultation, particularly in regard to the theatre and Baptist Church, which is not factored in the Jensen planning at all. And I thank you all for your time. And I hope that's gone through at least once.
3 seconds to spare, don't
That's why I'm reading.
So, is there any clarifying questions of Diana?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Richard.
Diana, you've quoted a bit in out of the documents there, which says limited consultation required or limited concern, and it may create some confusion there. You've agreed, because that in the report talks about limited concern about specific elements that were part of the master planning exercise around portable elements. It wasn't in relation to any of the other elements within the project plan. And you would understand from the consultation process that there are multiple points of consultation within that process. And within that, council has obviously then taken those opportunities to engage the community, and will do that more so if and when the projects get through. Just wanted to run that answer.
I appreciate what you're saying, through the chair. I appreciate what you're saying there, Deputy Mayor, and I think that's what we're reiterating. Please come back to the community and do further consultation, because, you know, from my experience, quite often the reports are received and, you know, there may or may not be another level of consultation. And given that these projects needed to be shovel ready and pretty much ready to go, with hopefully a 24-month completion date, although I notice in some documents it does say 30 months, you know, you've got a very limited window of opportunity to go back and forth and consult and get, you know, quotes, tenders, everything happening. So that's what I think the community are afraid of.
Thanks, Jack. Yep. Councillor Davis.
Through you, Chair, I just want to say thanks for actually encouraging and being able to coordinate the community to come together to actually have this voice, because it just has been invigorating to see that the whole community has come together and wants to know what's going on now, I've seen so many consultation where we've had just so little, you know, participation, and I just think this is really good. I think council having the ongoing consultation, and people can actually go to the Mortless Theatre on the 22nd and the 25th and actually ask people questions and all of those sort of things. It's just been encouraging to have everybody come together on the same, you know. I'd like to say thanks.
Through the chair, thank you, Linda. And can I just say that we did have almost 130 people, actually probably a bit more, at the community meeting, and I had so many apologies, and people actually turned up the next day, and people ringing me, texting me, they were away and stuff like that. And I think that for a lot of our smaller, you know, neighbouring councils, they've got resident and ratepayer associations or progress associations, or, you know, like different community groups that look after individuals, not so much the businesses, which are covered off in our chamber of commerce, but just individuals and residents and ratepayers. So I think coming together as an action group has been a good thing. Yeah, as long as the momentum's there and the people are inspired, we'll just keep going and see where it takes us.
Are there any further questions?
Also, yeah, just as an elected member, you're aware around the code of conduct, as we all are. And I'm interested in the fact that there was a vote of no confidence in council and how your leadership is looking at inspiring confidence in council and council's decisions as part of a team approach as a community. Because I guess it's been disappointing to see what's been the misinformation that's been happening around that when council is running a concurrent process. So I just wonder about your purpose in that level of leadership where that's been quite, I see it as misleading and also generating a lack of confidence in council.
I think the leadership is here and you have to look at yourselves at what you're doing to bring to the community. And because of the lack of community engagement, that has resulted in the vote of no confidence. The leadership starts here. You are in charge of what decisions get made for our community right here. That's why I'm imploring you to have a look and reconsider and also take a step back. You know, the community has been speaking. There's lots of feedback online, the Survey Monkey, the letter, the minutes, various things. Please take that all on board.
I don't think there's any issues about it's not taken. Is there any further questions for Diana? No? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
So we have a recommendation there that Councillor Napier receive the deputations from the Port Lincoln cinema owners and from Ms Mislov, and thank them for their presentations. Can I have a move for that, please? Councillor Davies, do you want to speak on it at all?
No, just thank you for their sharing of information.
Yep. Second, Councillor Jolly, do you want to talk on it, Peter?
No.
Okay. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 10 is elected members' reports. My activity report is there. The only thing that I will add is last night I attended the multicultural dinner with Councillor Rouse. So I think we had a hell of a time.
I'm still marked.
Yeah, a wonderful experience, really wonderful experience. Is there any questions on any other aspects of my activity report?
I've got a question on the Indigenous Community Development Information Meeting, and I understand Cohen and Swain are doing some work at the police station. I was just interested seeing some of the other conversations that are happening in the community about what sort of strategies and things that are being discussed there.
I might throw to Helena. Are you here? She's not here?
Oh, sorry, she's out with the
Okay. So basically it was one of the community hospitals is coming together with the various support groups and social work type groups, welfare type groups around the city. First of all, to have a quick look at how we can engage Indigenous youth in employment programs and the like. And they were looking basically at how we can encourage and engage. I think we were looking at, from a council point of view, how we could actually look at any grant opportunities that might be there so that we can engage Indigenous youth to come and work with us as part of our employment programs. I'm not sure where Helena's got up to with that, but it wasn't too bad at all. So it was well attended. But the champion is the young community constable. I can't remember his name.
Cohen. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor Jack.
I think it's all covered there on the document there. So right on there with PSA Power Networks engagement sessions, GLGA conference, welcome event. And if there's anything to add to that as well, and some contact with Moroto 30th anniversary. Most of them covered it. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. No worries, and we'll go around Councillor Broadfoot. Any,
Just to remove the 3rd of March, because that must have been a copy and paste. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought you guys looked pretty similar.
Yeah, that was.
Thank you. Councillor Rousseau.
Just as read, thank you.
Councillor Lynn.
Only that I went to the SHR network, I just claimed to go back to the written.
That was pretty good, I think. Yeah. Councillor Jolly.
Just on the 23rd of February, I attended the 14th.
Thanks, mate. Councillor Davis.
That's something you need.
Yeah.
It's all good, but I won't record that.
Give that little note in there. Councillor Davies.
I've been on an absent leave, but in that time I actually attended the community action group meeting and point on.
Just a reminder, members, if we can talk a little bit louder than usual for the extended gallery, please.
Councillor Stauden.
I attended the ETLGA conference.
Yeah, that was good. We all forgot that.
Very informative.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Councillor Dodd.
Very quiet, Mark.
No worries. What we'll do is we'll jump from here and we'll go to item 12.5. Is petition received heritage listing of the Flinders Theatre and Baptist Church. I'll hand over to you, Matt.
So just noting we've got a conflict of interest for Councillor Russell, who will leave the chamber.
Thanks, Robin. You have to go a long way away because you'll hear it. Yeah. Okay, Matt, over to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the report to receive the petition that was provided to council by Mr. Kevin Smith on behalf of the residents of City of Port Lincoln who signed the petition. So I'm not sure whether the petitions are currently out. They have been tabled. I think they're floating around the elected members at the moment. In effect, this was a petition that was tabled at council in 2019. And without full verification of the signatures, I believe there were some additional signatures they got provided on the petition, but many of the signatures and many of the pages submitted were the pages that were submitted back in 2019. When receiving the petition in 2019, council noted and received the petition and advised that the future of the Flinders Theatre would be considered as part of the strategic directions plan process. So given that council has received the petition already and it's been resubmitted without casting any assertions over the validity of the petition, given that people's opinions who signed the petition 2 years ago may have changed, it's recommended that council receive the petition, advise the head petitioner that council has already considered the petition in 2019. And then the recommendation is that council further advise that council will not commence proceedings to heritage list the buildings located on the corner of Adelaide Place and Hallett Place, as this is inconsistent with the intent of council purchasing the land. So the original reports for council purchasing the land date back to 2012 when negotiations started. The land was purchased in 2014 with the purpose of redevelopment, and that's been included in various iterations of the strategic directions plan in there. So it's council's prerogative on what it wants to do with the petition in terms of receiving it, but my recommendation as CEO is that it receive the petition and advise that council will not pursue the heritage listing of the buildings on that site.
So is there any clarifying questions for client? Councillor Davies.
Through Chair, Matthew, that just a question for yourself. In saying that statement and that recommendation, that doesn't mean that there won't be a final consultation. This, like the draft that we've got shovel ready, it's still going to go back, and there still could be a chance of saving parts or the facade, etc., even though we're not heritage listing the building, it still doesn't mean that we're going to knock it to the ground, does it?
Correct. So through you, Mr Mayor, the petition is being dealt with on the basis of the petition, not in the context of the projects that council has put forward and put out for consultation and submitted for grant funding. So the request of this petition is that council consider heritage listing, which is a separate process to the possible preservation of elements of those buildings in a new design. So it doesn't restrict or preclude council from including those elements in the design. It just simply states that council doesn't intend to go and try and register with the Department of Environment these buildings as heritage buildings.
Okay, is there any other clarifying questions? I'll have a mover then for the recommendation as it stands. Councillor Jolly, you want to speak on it, please?
No, I disagree with the statements that's been presented.
Thank you very much. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Davies, do you want to speak on it?
No.
Okay. Is there any speakers for or against? No. All those in favour?
Members.
All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 12.6 is the petition received request for further consultation on proposed demolition of Flinders Cinema. And over to you again, Matt, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So this is a second petition that was received by council. The head petitioner is Miss Anna van der Haar, and this is being received by council in relation to the development plans for the Adelaide Place and Hallett Place properties. The petition was tabled a few moments ago and it's currently doing its rounds around the table. And it's to note that the petition is actually being received on behalf of the residents of the City of Port Lincoln, residents of Lower Eyre Peninsula and other municipalities which have signed the petition. The petition is effectively calling on council to reconsider its approach to these projects in regards to community consultation and commit to further community consultation. And then also through that process determine the best wishes of the public. Without making any assumptions around what the best wishes of the public are in the context of the petition, and noting also that there were some observations made by the head petitioner on the people who have signed the petition, particularly that 50% of the people who signed the petition didn't even know what the projects were they were signing the petition for. I think that's an indication of the validity of the petition. That being said, the intention of council was always to conduct further consultation on these projects. So I think what is being requested of the petitioner is consistent with council's plans anyway. The recommendation there is that council receive the petition and advise the head petitioner that council is committed to further consultation on the redevelopment plans for the site should partner funding be secured.
I'm happy to move that way. And I guess, as we all know, having been part of the workshops in December and January, where we've worked really hard over what these proposals can look like to go out to the public, and adaptive reuse has always been part of the consideration with that. It was really heartening to see the conversation that's also going with the National Trust of South Australia and looking at design options through there about what we can do with adaptive reuse, and also, I guess, restructuring sites so that it can be used and maximised for the community. So with all of that in mind, I'm happy to move this motion.
I'll just get you to hold on to that for a second. Is there any clarifying questions from anyone regarding the report? Yeah, Councillor Davies.
I wish to move a motion in two parts. Number one, and the mayor may, like if you would like it to be two separate motions, but number one, that council, one, notes and receives a petition submitted by Anna van der Haar on behalf of residents of City of Port Lincoln and the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula and visiting tourists who have included in the petition as tabled, and two, advise the head petitioner that council is committed to further consultation about the redevelopment plans for the site should partner funding be secured for the project. Then part two, that council, noting the significant interest that residents of the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula have in the facilities and services provided by the City of Port Lincoln, as evidenced by their participation in both petitions, request a briefing paper to be provided to council on the process for instigating a local government boundary reform discussion.
Would you be prepared to accept that as the next?
Just as the move, I think that's a totally, sorry, through you, Mayor Brad, that's a totally different conversation, and we probably don't want to confuse this situation any more than it already is in the community. So yeah, I would think 1 and 2 is fine.
Can I suggest we've got to move it for the recommendation as received? Yep. So we deal with the motion as moved,
and then
I wouldn't suggest amend. So move it as received, and then for Linda to move the second part of that motion, and see if there's a second for that as well.
So get the first one through
so
first.
First one's moved by Andrew.
You're okay with that? You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
okay, so
is there a seconder for the first motion?
Yeah, so if we go for a seconder on what Andrew's about, Councillor Dodd, you want to speak on it?
No, not at this stage.
Okay, all those in favour of the original motion? Motion carried, thanks. Now, through discussion, there's a second part there to the motion. So, Councillor Davies, do you want to just reiterate the second paragraph there that you were talking about?
Number 2, that council, noting the significant interest that residents of the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula have in the facilities and services provided by the City of Port Lincoln, as evidenced in both participation in petitions, request a briefing paper be provided to council on the process for instigating a local government boundary reform discussion. In speaking to, that's what I'd like as the motion, but in speaking to that, this has really brought up a lot of discussion in our community. And I think that's really great. I love the fact that people are participating. I love the fact that I'm hoping to see, lots more people going to that meeting on the 22nd and the 24th. I'm hoping to see council actually really take note of what's been said and the final draft to look like what the voice of the people want to see. But what I also have brought to my attention through this whole process is just how much there is a group of people that are in a whole different council, but they are passionate about our services that we provide, and perhaps those passionate people and the fact that they're not going to Cummins to get their groceries, but they're coming here every day, perhaps that should, those rateable incomes should be being used on the people that are receiving those services daily.
Is there any clarifying questions for Councillor Davies on that? No, can I have a second, please? Councillor Staunton,
I'm happy to second that.
can you speak on it?
Just agree with the points Linda gave, and I think it's been discussed quite a bit that a lot of the closer district council residents to Port Lincoln are using one of our facilities, yet they're not contributing to. So I think looking into a discussion would be the first step.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. I think it's consistent with the strategic directions plan and some of the objectives in there. So,
yeah, okay. Is there any?
Ask a question.
Yes.
Can I seek clarification from the CEO as to the synergy between accepting a petition and talking about boundary alignments?
Through you, Mayor Brad.
So far as this motion goes.
Yeah, so I guess this is the intent of Councillor Davis for the motion from the floor in relation to the receiving the petition. I can see that there is a linkage here. Council have received a petition from residents of 3 or more council districts which relates directly to how council provides services and facilities to the community. It's not unreasonable or to expect that there's a stretch then to understand, well, is there a need to explore the correlation between these residents in those areas and whether or not they should be providing rates revenue to fund said facilities. So if you're asking for my opinion, Councillor Davis, I think there is a link. I guess it's the will of the council now to determine a resolution. The motion put forward by Councillor Davis.
So is there any speaks for or against?
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, through you. I guess I'm interested in the impact of the timing of this motion now, where it's not something that we've, we haven't had preparatory reading on, we haven't looked at the background and what your, given that it's essentially policy on the run, although it is in our strategic directions plan, what your opinion is about then how that potentially does confuse or, confuse the other processes that we've got running. Whether it's recommended that we do this now, and I guess the other part of my question is the implications for not passing it. Does that mean that there's a 12-month, wait until something like that could be brought up again?
I think it's only a request for a briefing paper.
Yes, it's a request for a briefing paper. I guess in terms of answering the question through you, Mayor Marty, I know it's not my motion, but I don't see it as inconsistent with some of the discussions that council will need to have. And I think the local government reform bill, which is to go through Parliament shortly, one of the big items in there is the removal of site value as an option from a rating principle. So I think if we're talking about the rating system and we're talking about how council funds its services and its facilities into the future, I'm sure that this is a discussion point that will happen in the next 6 months anyway. So I don't think simply requesting a briefing paper on it is inconsistent with discussions that we may be having in advance.
Thank you.
Any other statements for or against or questions? No? All right, let's throw it to a vote. All those in favour? 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 2, 3. Motion carried.
Sorry, a question of process. We've now got Councillor Rousseau out of the room on an issue she doesn't have a conflict of interest on because we've moved to another motion that wasn't on the agenda. Which is a pity.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to think. We'll just hold on that vote.
Well, I think it's standard. I think it's noted in the minutes that Councillor Russell is not here. So I think if you were to call the division, we could ask Councillor Russell to re-enter the room and then vote as part of the division. But we've moved and passed the motion.
Either way, it's going to pass.
Yeah, I get that.
But the point is taken, so I can put the vote to one side and we can ask Robin to come back in. I'd be a bit more comfortable.
So from a process point of view, we'd need to call the division.
Well, I can put the vote to one side. We can call it again.
I think you call the division. I think you can't put the vote to one side.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to call
we've
it.
Effectively vote. So call the division.
Oh yeah, thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go back through it again.
Yeah, that's a good pick up. So that is
Councillor Rousseau.
yes.
Just while I'm sitting, sort of like being at the cinema now. I'll just wait for it.
We had a, whilst you were absent, we covered various aspects of the agenda that you had conflicts with, but there was a motion that was taken from the floor where you were not conflicted.
Okay.
I presume you're not conflicted. And we considered that it was appropriate that we call a division and re-vote on that particular issue so that you have the opportunity to vote. So the difficulty that we've got is that we have to go through the motion so that you can see it. Is it up there?
Yes.
So just about, I'll read that out. So, so the motion was moved by councillor Davies and seconded by councillor Staunton, which is that council noting the significant interest that residents of the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula have in the facilities and services provided by the City of Port Lincoln, as evidenced by the participation in both petitions, request a briefing paper be provided to council on the process for instigating a local government boundary reform discussion. The underlying basis of that was that if we're providing and making decisions based on a petition received, which is effectively funded by City of Port Lincoln ratepayers, that it's reasonable to suggest, or it may be reasonable to suggest then that there should be some discussion around those people who use the services and facilities are actually ratepayers of the City of Port Lincoln. But at this stage, the motion is only to request a briefing paper on the process of local government boundary reform.
And
Yep.
And also due to the fact that rates will be a big topic in the next 6 months, about changing from, to capital and all sorts of things, that it's in a strategic direction to actually investigate these sort of things. So it'll be on the cards anyway. I'm just bringing it to the table.
So we previously had a vote on it, realised that there was a process issue, so division was called. So what we'll do is we'll re-vote on it again. Are you comfortable with being able to vote on that?
I will, but I'm just conscious that, I may not have the information that everyone else has, but no, I'm happy to vote. I will vote for it. Yeah, I'll vote. I'll vote.
Okay, so so the motion is as read. Division called. Those in favour, please stand and remain standing. Right. So 5-4. 1, 2, 3, 4 against. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Good. So we move on. Who said local government wasn't interested? We move on to item 12.7, economic stimulus projects consultation.
So just to note that Councillor Russell has declared a material conflict. And Councillor Lynn has declared a perceived conflict in this agenda item. Now, I won't go over the full details of the report. If you've read the agenda, you'll know that we've tried to restate some of the background on the projects and the consultation process that we've gone through. Council, it has to be said, I think, has received an overwhelming response to this consultation process. We knew, and we discussed this at the special meeting, that it would be a consultation process that is the start of the journey in terms of consultation on these projects, and that there was no way that in a period of time that we had allocated to get the funding submissions and the planning done on these projects, that we were going to be doing the detailed consultation that's required on these projects necessary to ensure that the projects are relevant and that they're required, but also that meets the requirements for potential review. So the decision was made as part of the process that effectively council had to pull forward projects if it wanted to capitalise on the funding opportunities available under the local government infrastructure projects partnership program, which is the state government funding. The projects have to be projects which weren't already in the pipeline for the next financial year and the following financial year. And if we were to be successful with securing the funding, it also meant that we couldn't reduce capital expenditure on other projects in the first 2 financial years. So effectively what this meant was that 68 councils across the state from late November through to the 29th of January were working on how they can expedite planning on processes and projects that they may have been considering doing in years 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 and onwards of their strategic directions plan, their long-term financial plan. In terms of the process that council went through, there's a list of effectively unfunded projects that council pulled from over that next 10-year period. And we're talking about projects that were identified through the master plan precincts process. We're talking about projects that were identified through a strategic property review process, which actually commenced in 2012. And a large portion of that process has been conducted in confidence over the years. But also additionally other projects which have been earmarked for council in terms of, Punkala Trail extensions through to Axel Stenros Museum, along with Puckeridge Park upgrades and a range of various other open space and reserve projects. Effectively, the process the council went through via 2 workshops was bringing down a $55 million bill of unfunded projects which are planned in the future down to what it believed it could financially deliver through reviewing the capacity of its long-term financial plan, which effectively brought it down to a $32 million component of projects, subject to securing $18 million of partner funding from the state and federal governments to deliver that. Now, for those members who were part of the workshops and part of the discussions at the special meetings to discuss these projects, you'll be aware that all the modelling was done on best worst case scenario. So if we were to receive funding for all of the projects, we've demonstrated that we had financial capacity to deliver those projects with the partner funding, utilising low interest rates, utilising some of the cash reserves the council already has, utilising borrowings and the cash advance debentures, but also utilising and leveraging rental revenue that costs that council is paying out for some of the facilities at the moment. So the fundamental underlying aspects of these projects is that council decided that it had the financial capacity without changing the parameters of the long-term financial plan, which means no rate increases to fund these specific projects. They're funded through other means, but it could deliver up to $32 million worth of projects. Now, the reality is it's highly unlikely that we will realise the funding for all of these projects. And the modelling is done on best worst case scenario. Best case in that we get all the funding, worst case is that we've then got to account for that financially. So the modelling that was done was presented to council, various iterations of the workshops. It was presented to the Audit and Risk Management Committee and then presented to council on the 25th of January at the special meeting. The modelling is just an indication of the buckets of money that council would have available to deliver these projects. Through that process, council worked on the notion of buckets of money and worked on the principle of if it wanted to deliver key projects in the next 10-year period, looking at what we already don't have planned in the next 2 years, what would they be? And from that $55 million funding of unfunded projects, what that came down to was delivering part of the civic and community facilities strategy, which council had been discussing since 2012, delivering key elements of the foreshore as part of the master plan, but then also fast tracking some stormwater infrastructure, because the third project in there was the stormwater infrastructure, which council has funded half of within its means, and it's then asking for an additional $4.7 million from the state government to fund the remaining balance of the priority projects. Given the timelines to expedite the planning on these processes, we knew that this would be a consultation process that would upset some people. We knew that there was going to be notions and concepts in there which may be foreign to some people, even though council has been planning sometimes. And indeed, the advance notice that we had to give to key stakeholder groups was very apologetic in the sense of, we've got something to tell you post 25 January, but we can't tell you until we've actually got the confidentiality laws lifted on some of these key projects. And I think that was when we had key consultation meetings, that was part of the opening discussion was, we are sorry that we haven't been able to have this conversation with you until this point, but we are now here to have the consultation. The other key important part of when council decided the 3 projects that we put forward for funding and for the expedited planning processes, was that if you look at the terminology used by council in all the approvals, we've referred to them as final draft concepts. They're not final plans. They're not final construction documents. And some of the consultation that we've had with the key stakeholders has explained that if you look at a design process for any of these projects as a 100% of a process, on these design projects, we are literally somewhere between 10 and 20% of the way through the design process, which means there is literally 80% of the process to go. And 80% of the process will be informed by community feedback. And that was the commitment the council made on the 25th of January. And it knew that subject to funding on each particular project would then take its own turn in terms of how it consults with the community thereon in. For those elected members, and I'll talk specifically about the Civic Centre project, for those elected members who were at the workshops and at the meetings, you'll know that the notion of adaptive reuse has been discussed on and off for several years in the context of the Strategic Properties Review. Now, it wasn't possible for us in the 8 weeks between the end of November and the 29th of January to explore and fully cost all options. And we make no apologies for, I make no apologies for that as CEO. But what we did say during those workshops was if there was a clear mandate from the community, from these consultation processes, that there is a value on these buildings or the heritage value of these buildings and the social value of these buildings, then that is something that will be considered as part of the final design process. I think that may not be something that we've stressed enough through the consultation process. We have put a lot of effort in with the questions of transparency on council on these consultation processes is almost it's silly in a sense, because the amount and volume of information that has been put out in the community available online in relation to these projects for anyone who took the time to read that would see the process the council has gone through in a short period of time to arrive at where council has arrived at. But the commitment of council is this is the start of the journey. It's not the end of the journey. It's not the final conclusion. So tonight, elected members, you are receiving over 150 pages, if you print them like I have, of written summaries and submissions from the community on the various projects that we've put out for consultation. Lots of questions, lots of constructive feedback, lots of positive support, lots of negative presentations against some of the projects. And you will also have received a massive document, again, around 150 pages, which has been put together by the staff in response to collating the survey results and the survey written summaries in terms of the responses to the projects. Huge volumes of information, which blown away by the fact that we received over 700 survey responses. So I think council can be proud of the community, but it can also be proud of itself for sticking to its consultation plan, which now you're going to receive that consultation feedback. Council's only obligation tonight is to receive the feedback, but it is recommended, and I'm tabling 3 documents tonight for further consideration, which I have provided to the elected members prior to the meeting, which deal with each particular project and potential directions and recommendations and resolutions of council. If council wants to specifically incorporate and embrace some of the feedback on this evening as a way to move forward with projects as well.
Through you there, Brad. One point that I think in the whole debate that somewhere got lost in the ether was when we first looked at what we're going to do is developing a site, the consultants came back absolutely unanimous in saying cinemas don't work, don't have them. And then thanks to Councillor Broadfoot and Deputy Mayor Ritchie arguing up and saying, hey, we need a cinema, this is something that we need to fit into the plans and do it. We took the advice that was given to us not to have cinemas and totally disregarded it and said, this community will have a cinema and how are we going to fit that into the complex? And there seems to be a sort of thing of saying, oh, we're getting rid of the cinema on all the debates and things that's come back. Has actually missed the feel of the council in saying, hey, in this community, well, even though they say it's not going to work, we're going to make it work. and that somewhere has got missed, so, I don't know how we get that out there a bit, but I do believe that, you know, there was some really passionate argument during the workshops to say, let's have a centre, and we spent a lot of time working out how we could do it. Look, it may do it other things and have other art stuff and have some other variants that it comes, but kind of our underlying big red we will have was a centre.
Thanks for that. Is there any clarifying questions, Councillor Davies?
I don't know if it's a clarifying question, but
If you want to make a statement for or against, we'll get a move first, but you can ask a question if you wouldn't mind for clarification.
Happy to move it.
yeah,
So just to clarify if I can there, Brad, so the recommendation would be to the council to deal with the recommendation on page 34 of the agenda, and then I'll table each document separately because Councillor Rousseau may like to come back and join the meeting for two of the discussion documents on the stormwater project and on the foreshore project, but obviously won't be part of the conversation for the Adelaide Harbour Place. So if you've got a mover from...
Yeah, just hang on a sec. Is there any, do you have a clarification question? No, hang on, Jack. No, still, hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Davies, do you have a
yep,
clarification?
so the council notes and receives the attached consultation summary report for the consultation of the economic stimulus projects. And 2, reiterates its commitment to conduct further dialogue with the community in relation to each of the 3 projects put forward as economic stimulus projects should they receive funding approval and process beyond grant ready status. Yes, I'm prepared to move that.
Oh, I thought you had a question.
So,
You said I had to move it if I wanted to make a statement.
So, no, I did. No, so what I said, I had that.
Three of me, I think we'll take the moving the motion from Councillor Davis.
No,
I
Councillor
put my hand up and
Hang on a
actually said.
Now, hang on, I'm going to clarify it for you, all right? I said, is there anyone got any clarifying questions? You still came up and you were making a statement. And I said, I'm happy to have statements for or against after we have it moved, okay? So then Councillor Dillon put his hand up to move it. And I said, hang on a second, I just want to make sure, do you have a clarifying question? And then you read out the recommendation. So I'm still coming back to the point is, do you have a clarifying question? And if not, then I'll go to Councillor Dodd to move it. No? Okay, Councillor Dodd, you're prepared to move the recommendation?
Prepared to move.
Want to speak on it?
I'd love to speak on this motion. In the 2 years, firstly, I support everything Matthew's just said in relation to the consultation process, the workshops, the amount of time that's been spent going over projected projects and costings and designs and everything else. In the 2 years I've been on council, I've never seen so much public community consultation. It's driving you nuts. The amount of consultation, wouldn't mean just get on and make a decision, but we go to the community and we seek consultation on nearly everything we do. We've had 12 months for strategic development plans, then we have budget consultation, then we have planning workshops, then we have consultations on projects. We're probably bitten off a bit more than we can chew on occasions, instead of focusing a little bit narrower on some key projects, maybe pushing them along. It's been a fairly broad sweep on occasions. But the consultation summary report, to go through 850 submissions on those 3, could have been 4 projects, Liverpool Street's dropped off Dipsy. But the consultation on the 3 projects, there's some wonderful suggestions that's come back from the community. There's some weird wacky ones too. They'll all be taken into account when the decision finally gets made, subject to finance being made approved finance from the government. So it's academic at this stage, and I agree we're only just at the beginning of the process. But there's no way known the Jensen report of $55 million worth of projects was ever going to get off the ground in total, ever. So to narrow that down, I think was a wise, very astute move. It gave us an opportunity to put in submissions to the government for funding. It's affordable, it's doable. If we get all 3, it'll be a miracle. If we get 1, it'll be a bonus. So I'm happy to support this recommendation.
Thanks very much. Is there a second for the motion? Deputy Mayor Ritchie.
Happy to second it.
Speak on it, Jack.
also just say thank you to CEO Matthew for that overview of the project, and I think it's great to clarify that the consultation elements were built in all the way, as Councillor John has said. They're and it's been wonderful that it has generated the feedback and the input as well, and it's provided an opportunity to clarify some of those misunderstandings. So totally support that, and yeah, happy to second that motion.
Thanks very much. Speakers for and against.
I'd like to speak for the motion, but I'd also like to say that I do believe, and I have actually mentioned this to this council sitting here tonight, that our locals have got a history with that building of the theatre. And I did ask at this table if we could at least keep the facade. I didn't think the cinema was a huge issue. I think everyone was on board at keeping the cinema, but everybody wasn't on board with keeping the theatre. And I do believe we need to incorporate that building. And I think this feedback that we've got has been really hopefully encouraging to see the need, that history in this community, this regional town of ours, city of ours, that we need to actually listen to these people. And yeah, I'm glad that we are still going to have further dialogue with the community in relation to each of the three projects, because I believe the theatre is a decision we need to factor into our final concept when it does happen.
Thanks very much. Is there any other statements for or against?
I'd just like to speak for the motion, and I'd really like to thank the staff and everyone who's worked on this process. We know that people gave up their Christmas and New Year breaks to get this work developed, and I'd just like to commend my elected member body and also the staff for the respect and professionalism and clear communication that's gone around this, and also the level of technology that we've brought into the process and how social media has really been activated in that process in a really positive way. And so it's great to see everybody here using their powers for good, and we look forward to hearing more about how these projects will unfold, given the miracles that will occur as our funding flows into our community from the government.
Okay, all those in favour? All those against? Motion carried. Thank you. Now what we'll do is we'll, Matt, you've got those.
Not yet. No. So we'll deal with the first table document to deal with the Library Visitor Centre. So the intention is that these are being tabled, so these will form part of the minutes, regardless of what happens in relation to a motion. The documents themselves will be tabled as part of the minutes. Now, the first one I'll draw your attention to, and this was really just to give some discussion for elected members this evening. Aside from just receiving the consultation report and committing to further consult on the projects, it's really just to pave the way. Noting one or two things, I think the first thing is that the council may like to provide some direction on these projects as an indication of how it will receive the community feedback and how it may influence the projects moving forwards. But secondly, if the state government is still on plan, the 19th of March is when they expect to make the first announcements around the local government infrastructure planning partnership program. So what that means is 19th of March, which is Friday this week, we could have some either good news about funding for projects or some mediocre news that another council has received funding for projects, but it's still good for the state. So I guess in preparation of that, we've prepared some key themes documents with some proposed or some recommendations on a potential way forward with some of the projects, just to give an indication of which way council is leaning and the next steps. So the first one that we'll discuss is the Library Visitor Centre. So with this, it's just a summary, couple of page document, and really just reiterating the strategic alignment of this particular project, which, as you can see there, I'm not sure if we've got copies of.
Have we got hard
Screen.
copies? No.
Oh,
Should-
yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Basically, the strategic alignment is that the Civic Centre project on Adelaide and Hallett Place has been in Council's strategic directions plan since 2012 review, where it specifically mentioned development of a joint use civic centre in the CBD. 2012 was when Council moved to begin negotiations to purchase the Adelaide Place and Hallett Place properties. It then went through the consultation process around the strategic directions plan 2016 to 2026, where it specifically mentioned investigate the consolidation of the civic centre, administration, library, community space and related facilities at the Adelaide Place, Hallett Place corner site. It's pretty clear what the strategic intent there was. And then in the most recent iteration of the strategic directions plan, to progress development of a civic and community hub. There's an allocation in the Council's annual business plan and budget this year of $150,000 to commence and proceed with project development and design work. So there's a pretty clear intent from a strategic prerogative for Council to proceed with this project. And all of those plans are major plans of Council which have been consulted on in broad sense from the community. Noting and not taking away from the fact that this specific project hasn't had extensive consultation. The key themes emerging from the consultation, and I think what we've tried to do here is, I know that elected members have taken the time to read the submissions and to read the survey results with everything that's in there. But I guess what we're trying to do is identify key themes that have come through that consultation process. And in relation to the Library Visitor Centre, some of the key themes are identified on the documentation there. Positive, so we'll uplift the interest to our CBD and activate the area. Cafe will assist with the viability of the cinema operation, resolves issues with the existing cinema. It's an appropriate development for a growing regional city and the need to engage local contractors for as much work as possible. Some of the negative themes in there, a loss of heritage and the request for adaptive reuse of existing buildings and facades. And that notion in there is quite a protracted conversation if we really wanted to delve deeper into that, because what was evident from the community responses through the surveys was that there were different slants on why these buildings are important. From some people, although less people arguing for their architectural significance, but I think the most overwhelming thing coming through the consultation was the social connection, in particular to the Flinders Theatre, which is that nostalgic connection to childhood, effectively, that this building has been there since 1929, and many families have patronised that theatre in many different forms over that period of time, including when it was a nightclub for a short period of time. So there's definitely a theme of connection with the community which has come through this consultation process. Again, I'll just reiterate the point that a lot of the feedback that came through was evident that people were responding to one portion or one aspect of the plans without having had the full picture of what was actually planned there. And when you see feedback coming in, like you can't get rid of the cinema, we need a cinema, when the plans actually have a cinema in them, it's a pretty good indication that the plans haven't been read in detail. The cost benefit of the building retention and reuse was not available for scrutiny. And again, it wasn't. The detailed, as I said earlier, the detailed design process in 8 weeks wasn't able to explore all opportunities. We're relying on 2 pieces of advice that Council had received in 2020 and 2019 from architects and engineers, advising that the cost of adaptive reuse for these sites would far exceed the cost of actually a new development. But that's an issue that remains to be explored. The proposed design is generic, uninspiring, and does not reflect our local identity. Traffic congestion, safety and proximity to primary schools at this location. And I guess just on that point, the traffic is a consideration that Council is making, and that's part of the reason why the Liverpool Street project has been deferred at this point, because Council is re-entering conversations with the Department of Transport around allocation of funding. So that whole carriageway is actually the Department of Transport controlled road. and we've identified the need for safety reviews and audits of all of the intersections and the roundabouts, and also to ask clarity from the department. Out of the $32 million that was allocated to roads of strategic importance on the Eyre Peninsula, how much of that has actually been allocated to upgrades in Port Lincoln, given Port Lincoln is the most highly trafficked area on that road network with pedestrians and mixed use. And I think where we were at was it was around $500,000, and that's something we want to pursue further before council does any further planning on Liverpool Street or any of those future upgrades. There is a very strong focus on safety along that carriageway, and that's not something that's been overlooked in the planning of this particular process. Traffic congestion also extends out through the consultation into discussion around school drop-off and pick-up times. I think my response to that, and I did talk to teachers and students at the Port Lincoln Junior Primary, which is actually adjacent to the property. I think the inclusion of more car parks directly in the vicinity, which won't be utilised at school drop-off time. The library doesn't open at 8:30 in the morning. The cinema's not going to be open at 8:30 in the morning. The visitor centre's not going to be open. So it will actually make school drop-off times safer because there will be more parks to be utilised by parents during the drop-off and the pick-up time. I would also argue that 3:30 in the afternoon is probably not a peak time for the library, the visitor centre or the cinema either. So I think the inclusion of more parking in that site will actually enhance the safety of the school drop-off and pick-up during that time. So I think the combination of, and again, this wasn't expressly put out there as part of the documents, but the combination of reviewing the safety along Liverpool Street, along Hallett Place, asking the questions of the Department of Transport around things like whether or not traffic lights should be or ought to be considered at some of these junctions, along with the additional parking that can be used as overflow for school drop-offs, will actually enhance the safety of those areas. The proposed cinema appears to be too small to be viable, and I think that's a theme that's come through the process, and there was some comments in there around $40 and $50 tickets for the cinema. I'm not sure where that came from. That was nothing that council published or released, so I'm not sure where that's come from. But you've heard from the cinema operators tonight that their preference is for a slightly larger area for seating within the cinema. But even further to that, the preference would be for twin cinemas, and that helps with the rotation of movies that they get from the distributors. Interesting note, the balcony area upstairs in the current cinema is around 180 square metres, and that's the predominant area which is used for cinema going at the moment, and the proposed size of the cinema in the draft concept plan was 162 square metres. So although there's a difference in seating capacity, the allocation of size is not that different from what's used for actual seating in the cinema at the moment. But they are considerations, and it was repeated through the consultation process. Some of the misconceptions there will lead to increasing council rates, waste of public money. And again, as stated before, these projects are predicated on no increase in council rates other than what's already included in the long-term financial plans. And that was part of the due diligence the council did in December and presented to the Audit and Risk Management Committee as well. So, and that was reiterated through various parts of the conversation in there, but there will be no direct increase in rates to fund these projects. That was something that council committed to as part of the process, and the money could be better spent on other priorities. Again, we refer back to the fact that council looked at the list of unfunded projects that it had already consulted on with the community in various forms. It was in a strategic directions plan, and pulled these out as priorities. So money could always be spent on other things, but council made the decision to fund major projects, or put forward for funding major projects which were in the strategic directions plan and other planning processes. I think if you read through the rest of it, again, this will be in the minutes, so it will be publicly available. I think there is the potential for council to take on board the feedback and put forward the next steps for this particular project. And I guess the next steps for this particular project would be that if we find out that we've got partner funding, we need to finalise the design brief for the architect. So noting that we are only 10%, if that, of the way through the design process, and Brown Falconer was engaged to get us to the grant ready status. And we said this through the workshops, and we said this at the special meeting of council. Council will choose the architect that designs this building and this development. There is scope when we finalise the design brief to incorporate and reincorporate the notions of reuse and adaptive reuse should council wish to pursue that. So the next steps are that council needs to select an architect to complete the final design. We need to develop the cinema and cafe operating model in discussion with the future operators. We need to commence the prudential review of the project so that we're ready to go and we've got the prudential review completed for council to consider the whole of life costs as well as the ongoing operating and running costs of this facility. We need to consult with the community on the final design concepts and how that's being interpreted. And we need to finalise the site design and the building documentation for construction and tender. All of that comes once we find out that we've got funding support for the project. Concurrently, and this was part of the future design process and other considerations on the site, is that we will continue to explore options that we didn't have the time to explore. And noting that this is a project that would potentially have been falling into year 2, 3, 4 of council's planning processes, what we've had to do is condense down this design consultation process into a period of 8 to 12 weeks. We haven't had the ability to have full conversations with other stakeholders. For example, one of the intentions of council under the strategic directions plan is to pursue linkages with universities and the notion of incorporating study hub options. There is funding available from the federal government to provide funding study hub options for this community, to embrace people who have either left school or coming out of school to stay in the community and study and get that further education. At the time of discussion in the workshops in December, we were starting very preliminary discussions with UniSA. And
just hang on a second.
Sorry.
With that, I note here in reading that Vice Chancellor Professor David Lloyd of the University of South Australia would lease space in the new facility as a prominent central location. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so it's part of those discussions exploring the future capacity of the site. And this was something that came through in the workshop with the elected members is council wanted to know that any development on that site would not prohibit or exclude further development should funding become available for other purposes such as university hub options. At the moment, UniSA currently leases space in the Department of Corrections facility in Tasman Terrace. And while we haven't had the ability to explore the funding model and the operating model for an education study hub, they have committed, because they're not 100% happy with the location of where they are committed that if we are able to incorporate enough space in this building for them, that they will rent that space from us. So that then has your linkage in there with the library, you've got your linkage in there with the schools. But what I guess that shows is when council wanted to look at the future capacities to expand that site, there are very real options for us to do that. And we have one stakeholder who's given us a statement of intent that they are willing to lease space in that site. But that is something that needs to be further explored outside of the current planning processes.
Okay, so just to clarify that that's stage 2.
That's effectively a stage 2. And if you recall, the planning council specifically requested of Brown Falconer when coming up with a design was make sure that we can realistically look at a future staging option on site. And that's the information that's on the website. It's the multi-storey car park at the back with a multi-storey building. That is the likelihood of something should we secure these arrangements with UniSA and other universities and secure study hub funding from the federal government. That is where we will look to further expand on that particular site. And the synergies there are pretty obvious with the library and those sort of other study spaces.
Just to clarify for people, council has had extensive workshops and meetings regarding significant background to what we're talking about tonight. There's been in-depth discussions, in-depth debates. A lot of information has been passed on to council in these workshops. that we've taken to arrive at the situation where we are now. So I'm just clarifying the fact there's been a huge amount of work that's been done by the elected body and the staff of the council to get to the position that we are now. Just over to you again, mate. Yep.
Can I ask a question?
No, you can't. No questions from the gallery. Thank you very much.
Quiet.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
So through you, Mayor Brad. So there's some resolutions or suggested resolutions. Should council wish to make a statement of intent in response to the community feedback tonight, there is no requirement for council to do so, but it does give us as an administration some form of direction on how we proceed with preparing briefs and other for the future of that site. So the suggested or the recommendations there, and again, it's council's prerogative on what it wants to do or how it moves forward with this, is that council indicate that in relation to the proposed redevelopment of Adelaide and Hallett Place, that although a current preference was resolved on the 14th of December 2020, which included the proposed demolition of existing buildings, that it will include the following provisions in the final architectural design brief, which will be issued should the project receive the necessary partner funding to proceed. Those conditions or the provisions in the design brief would be that the project architects give due consideration and preference towards the preservation and integration of the facade or larger elements of the Flinders Theatre and the former Baptist Church buildings on the condition that this must not limit the provision of sufficient site area for the development of the community spaces required for the library, visitor centre, changing places facility and cafe cinema operation, minimum 1,500 metres squared, ideally larger, and the potential to incorporate a larger cinema area or potentially twin cinemas. The provision of sufficient site area for the required on-site car parking to meet development requirements. Council's sustainability and environmental aspiration for the resulting buildings to achieve a 6-star Green Star rating or other similar sustainability performance rating. The ability to deliver the project and deliverables, library, visitor centre, changing places facility, cafe and cinema within the project budget of $12.24 million. And the ability to further develop the site should future funding become available for other community facilities, which could, for example, include cultural and art spaces, youth activity spaces, educational and university hubs and spaces. So the recommendation is that if council wants to make a statement of intent and to include the desire to give preference to the preservation of existing buildings or parts thereof in the resulting design, while still achieving the key objectives of council, then I guess the question is, why wouldn't council? And I think that's coming from the themes that have been received through the community consultation. The second recommendation can be part of the first recommendation. The second recommendation is that council accept the offer made by the National Trust of South Australia to enter into dialogue and seek input from the National Trust of South Australia with regards to the preparation of the final design brief for the project and to gain a further understanding of how the NTSA may be able to assist throughout the final design process. And that's an offer that was made by the National Trust of South Australia through the consultation process. You'll note they've referred in that letter to the conversations I had with them around the preservation of buildings in my former employment. But there is a genuine offer there from the National Trust of South Australia to work with council should council wish to pursue the notion of adaptive reuse or facade preservation of either or part or all of the buildings on the site at the moment. And the final recommendation in there is in relation to, I guess, the business model and the operation of the cinema moving forward should the project receive funding. The council authorise the CEO to enter into direct discussions with the current operators, leaseholders of the existing Flinders Theatre building with the intention of including them in the final design process and to develop a 10-year business plan and operating model for the cinema and cafe. And that will be subject to legal advice on the probity of a direct negotiation with the current operators of this nature. So there's three recommendations that are proposed resolutions are provided there to council for consideration, which can be moved or not, separately, collectively, or together. So happy to take questions.
Any clarifying questions at all? Councillor Davies?
Matt, the National Trust is that reserves?
Through you, Mayor Brad. So National Trust will provide advocacy and advice on a free basis. And part of the exploration will be what they can provide in terms of advice on the brief. If it progresses beyond that, then there are different models that the National Trust works under, and it depends on what the final design is. So there is the ability, and they referenced in their letter, there would be the ability for them to have effectively gangs of work, workers up here, skilled employees up here, training locals on restorative techniques and things. There will be, they receive funding from other sources to co-fund that, but there would need to be allocation from the budget to engage them in that part of the process if that's how the project ends up going. But I would suggest that the initial involvement of NTSA in providing advice on design brief and some of those objectives would be complementary. It's part of their objectives as an organisation.
Deputy Mayor Ritchie, you got a clarifying question?
Just a question whether there's an opportunity with the three elements of this motion to move it as one. It's consistent with the process that's been talked about throughout as well, throughout the consultation and with the workshops as well. The opportunity to consider this move to the next step as well. So I'm really going to have to move over this.
Just hang on a second, Jeff. Is there any other clarifying questions before we move on to that? Councillor Dodd?
We've got a bit more comfortable with the three split, three recommendations for split. I've got a concern with the third one in particular, negotiating a 10-year business plan with the existing lessees of the theatre. I think aspects of the third are fine, negotiate and talk to them in regards to design and cinema. I think you're probably treading thin ice negotiating a 10-year business plan at this stage. But I would suggest three be treated independently.
Through you.
Question.
Yeah, question through you. Just wondering if Councillor Dodd would see that that motion just includes the top dot point about including the current cinema operators in the final design process, and because the other elements are really council's business around sustainability of the model, and whether we leave those two dot points out, would that make it more comfortable?
Leaving the second dot point, if that was excluded, the first and the third are probably fine.
First and the third are probably fine, yeah.
So what's your point of view about doing that, Jack?
How many times you're going to move it as yet, but I would be happy to move it with that amendment as well.
Okay, thanks. Now, is there any other further clarifying questions at all? No, Councillor Davies?
I prefer to move them separately.
I'll move them separately. Okay. Jack, you got any concerns about that? We can move them separately to get things moving.
Either way, it's happy to take over to them.
Okay, all right. So can I have a mover then for the first element, which goes down to it incorporates the 5 dot points. So the first paragraph plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, six dot points there. Jack, you okay to move that?
Happy to move that.
Do you want to speak on it?
It looks like a very sensible approach and consistent with the discussion we've had. So, yeah,
Okay.
very much so.
Can I have a second, please? Councillor Broadfoot,
Yeah.
speak on it.
Yeah, I'm just happy we're here now.
Good, good. Okay, any statements for or against? Councillor Davis.
I will vote against it. I'm certainly and continue not to be in favour of this site. If this was in another location in Port Lincoln, I would certainly be supporting it. But this particular location, let's put the cinema to one side, the buildings to one side, the location itself is of grave concern to me. Maybe in years to come I'll be proven wrong, so be it, and I'll have to live with that. But currently, on what we're trying to achieve here, in a very small space, is very difficult.
I do not believe that this is the right location for our library or our visitor information centre in particular. So I will be disagreeing with all of these. It's the location, and that's why I did not support in principle and corporate division in relation to us supporting the application. Okay. So, and I've been consistent. This is right from the time that we purchased this land. I have endeavoured to work very hard, keep an open mind and listen to what everybody has had to say, the information that has been presented to us, what the community has talked about. At the moment, we are very, very focused on the buildings themselves and keeping the historical component of it. I'm not looking at that. If I did agree with the site, I'd say knock the whole lot down and start again, because I think that that's as important as true. But this site is not conducive to what I believe that we're trying to achieve for the next 24 years. And when you start adding a hub to it too, I agree, there's an educational component in amongst there, but we do have other areas within this local CBD outskirts area that would certainly meet the needs. And do we have to have all of it in one big location? I think we're very strategically not including our office space in amongst some of this. So I know it is a plan for the future, but I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other statements for or against? Councillor Davies.
I'll actually speak against this motion as well. I'm hearing Councillor Davies, but sadly it is our property now and we have to move forward. But I believe that we have to keep the minimum of the facade of the theatre, because that is, I suppose, what I'm hearing from the voice of the public. And I understand by listening to the cinema operators that the actual building itself is getting a bit dodgy, but I'm pretty sure that we can maintain and get to where we have to go by keeping that facade and building, onto it with good designers. So that's why I can't vote for that. I want people, I think enough people have actually said that just the facade needs to be kept. I'm hearing what Councillor Davies is saying, and I tend to understand, agree, but it is ours and we've got to do something with it. Like, it's been on the table for 10 years. We've got to do it.
You, the first dot point there, do you want to have a read of that?
Yeah. But then it goes on to say, if only.
Okay.
So that to me says that basically, if it doesn't meet your criteria, then we can chuck it all down.
Okay. Any other statements for or against? No. Oh, yeah. Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable compromise given the information that we received from the petitions and everything else. I think this is a good way going forward. So I'll support this as it is.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? All those in favour? Motion carried. Very much. Item 2 there.
Against.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's protocol.
Yeah.
All right. So all those against?
Thank you.
Thank you. No
And
worries.
can I call a division?
Sure. Okay. So all those for, please stand and remain standing. Councillor Broadfoot, Councillor Lynn, Councillor Jolly, Deputy Mayor Ritchie, Councillor Staunton and Councillor Dodd. Those remaining seated against, please stay up, please. Councillor Davis and Councillor Davies. Thank you. Okay, item 2 is that council accept the offer made by the National Trust of South Australia, etc. This is on the board behind me, I believe. So can I have a move for that, please? Councillor Lynn, do you want to speak on it?
No, happy to.
Okay, can I have a second for it, please? Councillor Jolly, do you want to speak on it, please?
Yeah, again, I think it's, these people are the experts in this field, and I think if we can tap into what advice they can give us in terms of incorporating the aspects of those builds. I think it's worth going ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there any statements for or against? All those in favour? All those against? Those. Yep. Okay, motion carried. Vision on that as well? No? Okay, we'll move on to item 3. Now, item 3, I understand, has got the middle dot point removed, is that correct? So the motion now reads that council authorise the CEO to enter into direct discussions with the current operators of the existing Flinders Theatre building with the intention of including them in the final design process and subject to legal advice on the probity of the direct negotiations with the current operators of this nature. Any clarifying questions required on that? Have a mover, please. Councillor Broadfoot, do you want to speak on that?
No, I've really appreciated the presentation tonight, and yeah, and also I guess from the start we've been talking about the opportunity for twin cinemas. So yeah, that's good to follow that up with them about what they're interested in for the viability of their business, as long as it meets probity requirements.
Yep. And can I have a second, please? Councillor Dodd, do you want to speak on it? No. All right. Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. All those against, just for the record, Councillor Davis. So thank you very much for that. Man, we've got a lot of work tonight, haven't we?
All right, we might bring Councillor Rossell back.
Sure thing. Is there a requirement for a comfort stop?
That would be great.
Okay, the time now is thanks a lot. Well, I'm still in session here, so just take it easy, eh? So the time is now 8:32. If we can return here no later than 22:09, please. So take 7 minutes. Thank you.